most companies say that they care about inclusion, but when it comes to hiring and culture and allyship, many truly miss the mark. Today's guests help organization moves from performance diversity to real culture change, and she's here to unpack what that actually looks like in
Mhm.
practice. I'm Simpane Powell, fractional HR director, chartered MCIPD, founder of Flight HR, and over the past 25 years, I've worked across 16 countries globally, partnering with founders and leaders and in supporting employees to build workplaces that they actually love. I'm here to challenge bad HR, the kind of HR that looks after processes instead of people and gives my profession a bad name. I'm here today with Chikere Igbokwe. She's an allyship and anti-racism educator, recruitment expert, the founder of Inclucive, where she delivers DE&I training and insights for organizations who truly want to build more inclusive workplaces.
Mhm.
She also created the Allyship Toolbook and Book Club, and she's helping people to develop confidence, language, and practical tools to show up for underrepresented colleagues and communities. Chi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sim, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be an exciting discussion.
I think it's going to be a great discussion. So, openness and
Mm,
clarity. Chi and I
mm.
have known each other coming up for, I want to say, 10 years now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that long, right?
I
We
think it. I
actually
think
met,
it is that long.
yeah, we actually met when she interviewed me for a job. Um,
Mm,
and we formed an allyship from there. So I'm glad that it stuck. I really am
I
glad
know,
that it
right?
stuck.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's get into this today because I think
Mm,
people really do need to understand this, especially with what's going on in the world at the moment. They really do
mm.
need to understand why we need to be committed to
Yeah,
allyship and DE&I.
yeah,
So, give us an overview of your background, what first drew you to the work, and what keeps you committed to it.
yeah. Definitely. Sim, thank you so much again. And I think about my why and why I do this work, and I always say that the work I do is purposeful. And my journey is from Southampton. So I think I've spoken to you before about this. I
Yeah.
wasn't born in London. I was born in Southampton, to a West Indian mother and a Nigerian father. So as you can imagine, Sim, growing
Mhm.
up at school in Southampton,
Yeah.
I was always the only black child.
Oh,
Okay. And I was the only black child with a funny name because people used to say, your name's funny. Why do they call you that? Okay.
yeah.
And as you can imagine, no one could ever pronounce my name. And back then, nobody even tried to pronounce my name.
Yeah.
So when we talk about diversity was something that, for me, it was always important. Okay. And I came to London to go to university, and coming to London was amazing because number
Yeah.
one, I was away from my parents. Number two, it was so nice to leave Southampton and come to university. And,
Yeah.
London, amazing. It was just so diverse, so different, so busy, full of everybody, full of people that look like me for a change.
Mm.
So it was just so nice to leave Southampton. And I worked in recruitment, and Sim, I fell into recruitment. Okay.
Okay.
And the reason why I fell into recruitment, when I finished university, I couldn't find a job. Okay.
Right.
And recruitment was the only job out there at the time. And I thought, "Do you know something? I'm going to try that."
Try
And I
it
really,
out.
really liked it. And I worked in the City of London. I used to recruit senior HR professionals like yourself. And that's obviously why, that link was there. And I
Yeah.
remember you were probably one of the very few black senior HR professionals that I used to interview.
Yeah.
HR at the time was full of amazing women. Okay. But there were
Yeah.
very, very few senior black HR professionals. So obviously linking with you was like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. Okay. So in HR, especially when we did, especially the kind of job I did, I used to have to go and see HR professionals and senior HR professionals like chief people officers, HR directors. And as you can imagine, HR was full of, amazing women. But when you would go on these client visits, it was men. And it was like, where are all the women gone? And
That's
where
it.
are all the people that look like me? And I think for me, having the conversation around gender, which was at the time, everyone had the conversation around gender. That was a conversation, when we spoke about diversity, rightly so, we spoke about gender. And Sim, as you can imagine, we never spoke about race or color of people's skin. And I think then I started to try and introduce a topic, but nobody wanted to have that conversation, Sim. And it was
Right.
so frustrating. And I think even when I did recruitment, I used to have my little groups. I had, the group of HR of color, female HR. I think for me, finding those groups of people, that
Yeah.
little community, it was something that I always, always did. And it was still really, really frustrating because at the time, change didn't happen fast enough. And it was
Got you.
only in 2020, as you can imagine, when we had the awful murder of Sarah Everard, we had the murder of George Floyd, that
Yeah.
people really sat up and started to think about diversity and not just gender. They spoke about race and sexuality, and the list goes on. And that's when I thought, you know something, I've been working in recruitment for this long. I want to do something else. And that's when I founded Inclusive. And as you mentioned, I help organizations create inclusive cultures. And allyship is something that I do an awful a lot on. So that literally is, how I decided to be a bit more purposeful and take that leap and start Inclusive.
I think it's amazing. As I said, I've known you for a long time. So when you said
Yes,
you were
yes.
going to open this business and this is what you were planning to do, I thought it was amazing because in the market, it was hard at certain points as a Black woman to get
Mm.
a job. And I know there's
Yes.
going to be people that watch this that are not going to be of that mind, but I'm going to speak my truth. But like,
Mm.
it becomes a little bit harder. Every intersection,
Hmm.
every intersection, and we'll explain what that is later, you know, makes it a little bit harder for you to get
It
that
does.
job.
It does.
So
It does.
when I think about stuff like that, and I think about what life can be and what things that happen within the workplace, and when people
Mm.
are hired, like, what's the toughest conversation that you've had with a founder about diversity? And then how did it change the way that you work with clients now?
Yeah. Sim, that's a big, the whole diversity thing, that's such a big question. Um, and it is a difficult conversation. How do you
Yeah.
tell a leader or how do you tell a founder that they do have a problem? Okay.
Mm,
And maybe their problem is not simply due to the lack of diverse candidates. The
yeah.
problem could also be culture. And I'm sure you know this from an HR perspective.
Yeah.
So
Oh
the
yeah.
problems, it's culture, it's with the recruitment process. And it could even be the leader or the founder's idea
Hmm.
of what the right person looks and sound like. That whole
Right.
in recruitment, they talk a lot about culture fit. That drives me crazy.
I
Okay.
hate
That
culture.
whole, you know, what are we fitting into?
Like, I literally have spoken to people and I've done recruitment recently, and I refuse culture fit
Yeah,
because culture fit means I'm looking for the same of me. Yeah.
exactly.
As a HR person, what we try to do is find you people that help to grow your business. We're
Exactly.
normally 5 paces ahead of where you are. And normally that is innovation and somebody that is
Yes,
not exactly like you because they will
exactly.
challenge your perspective in a good way. Yeah. And so many people are scared of that. They would rather hire more of the same.
And it's so funny you said that because it really did get me thinking as well. Because
Mm,
this can be really uncomfortable for founders and leaders
yeah.
because, of course, they care deeply about their organizations. They've built these organizations, right?
Mm,
Um, but they may hear questions around diversity, around inclusion, and they might think it's a criticism, of their character rather than a invitation to really examine their systems, the systems that they've built. So sometimes, Tim, it's so difficult to have the conversation with them because they just don't get it. They don't
yeah.
understand, and they all say to me, "Oh, Chikere, um, we've hired these people. It's always worked. Why am I going to change? Why am I going to change
Mm,
now?" And that in itself can be really, really frustrating. So
yeah.
those conversations, I really think they've taught me, it's not about blame or shame. It
Mhm.
really is important that I want these leaders and founders to begin with curiosity, to really question, to create that psychological, safe space so that people can be honest, so we can have these
Mhm.
conversations, and we can talk about, their why and why diversity really does matter.
Yeah. I think if you start with the why, and you focus on that and expand it, it's great because it builds your culture. And I think a lot of time we have conversations with people and it's trying to make them understand your culture at 5 people is not going to be your culture at 30. Your culture at
Definitely.
30 people is not going to be your
Definitely.
culture at 100.
No.
But if you maintain your values and what you believe to be the core why of the
Mm,
business, then
mm.
everybody is rowing the boat the same way. You know, there's no division, there's no trying to figure out what they believe culture is and trying to fill in the gaps,
Yeah.
which we see a lot of. You and I have both seen that, where people try and fill in the gaps because
Mm.
there is something fundamentally missing from that
Yeah.
bedrock that the business has started to make.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
like
I agree.
when we think about this, like, and when I think about this, and we've both walked into companies and literally scratched our heads a little bit. What do you think most leaders get wrong about
Mm,
inclusion at work?
mm, mm. This is a great question, Sim. And I think when we look at inclusion, many leaders, many founders, they treat inclusion as something people from underrepresented groups need. Okay? You need it because you're a woman. You need it because you're a black man, rather than a leadership responsibility and an organizational standard and goal.
Yeah,
Okay? And that's I think that's that kind of mindset that we need to change. Maybe they believe that having a diverse workforce means they have an inclusive workplace. But diversity is not just about who is present, as you obviously know.
yeah,
Inclusion is about whose ideas are being heard, who has the influence, who receives development opportunities, who feels safe enough to contribute and question, right, without having to minimize part of themselves, right? So I really want leaders to think about what inclusion means to them. I think that's
mhm,
something that we really need to try and get leaders to think about, because it's much more than kindness. It
yeah,
really does require leaders to examine power, privilege, challenge unfairness, make really good, equitable decisions, and take responsibility for the impact of workplace culture. And when we talk about leaders, Sin, we know who leaders normally are in
yeah.
the workplace.
So
Okay. So we really have to, I really want them to start thinking about that.
it's uh, what always baffles me is when you start to mention diversity and inclusion, people immediately think it's protective of Black people. Look, we saw what happened in America. We saw that, all of these people voted for Trump because they thought that it was going to
Yeah.
impact a whole section of people. And when in fact, inclusion doesn't just cover the color of your skin, it covers your gender, it covers your
Mhm.
sexuality, it covers
Exactly.
whether you're a parent, a carer, whether you have a disability. It's
Exactly.
and that's when we talk about intersectionality, because you could have several of those things that factor
Mm-hmm.
into you as a human
Mm-hmm.
being. It's not just about race. So all of these people that would have voted then lost their jobs and couldn't
Mm.
understand why,
Exactly.
because they had not realized that there is more to diversity and
Exactly.
inclusion than the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it still baffles me.
And it's
Why do
sad,
you?
right?
It's really sad. And like, these are why all these questions come up, and why I was so excited to have you on, because I feel like it's a discussion that's needed.
Mm.
But why do you think that so many companies struggle to move from the diversity talk to the actual culture change? Because
Yeah.
for your workforce to be truly happy, you have to, I'm not saying that you have to put a million things in place that don't make sense,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
certain things will make for a happy workforce, no matter color, creed, religion, whatever they are. Why do you
I
think
agree.
it's so hard for so many companies to move from the diversity talk to actually having that real culture change?
Yeah. Do you know why, Sim? Because
Mm,
talking is easier than changing systems.
yeah,
It's easy to talk, right? So think
yeah,
about
yeah.
it. As a company, you can publish a statement
Hmm.
easily. You can celebrate an awareness month
Yeah,
easily. Okay. You can deliver a one-off training session without changing who gets hired, who gets promoted, how complaints are handled, or who has access to senior leaders. Do you know that tick box exercise? It's easy to
yes,
do all that, Sim, right? So
yeah,
remember, talking is easier than changing systems. And when we
mm,
look at real culture change, what does it require? It requires work, right? It requires organizations to examine. It's almost like they're holding up a mirror in front of
yeah,
them, right? So they have to examine their recruitment progress. Their recruitment process, progression, performance, management, pay, leadership behavior, policies, everyday interactions, right? And think about it, it's not a one-off thing. So it's almost like
Yeah,
they're planting that seed, and think about all the work you've got to do in order for it to grow into something amazing. So, Sim,
yeah,
it's hard work. And that's
it is
why so many organizations struggle to move from that initial talk to real culture change.
to the next step. Yeah, I fully get that. I fully understand that. So, say like now, like if we think about obviously the founders and the leaders and the
Mm,
people I hope watch my podcast that are trying to figure out their businesses or they're on that evolution, what would be your approach to helping an
mm.
organization become genuinely more inclusive?
And Sim, you know, this is really difficult because a lot of some organizations I work with, they
Yeah,
don't really like this process. So they just want,
right.
oh my gosh, Chikere, come in, deliver a one-off training course on allyship. But they don't really want to go through the process. Okay. So for me, the process will be number one, to start by understanding where the organization is now. Okay.
Mhm,
Rather than imposing a generic solution. Okay. So
mhm,
even before I go in and say, oh, let's do an allyship workshop, I want to know where you are. Okay.
mhm.
So ideally, um, I want to listen. And this
Yeah,
may involve conversations with leaders, with employees. So, you know, those listening sessions. It'd be
yeah,
great to do an anonymous survey as well, you know,
yeah,
focus group, have a look at existing data. I want to understand the experiences behind the statistics. Okay.
mhm,
Whose voice are we missing? Whose voices are we not listening to? Okay.
got you.
So that will be, you know, that will really enable me to put a picture together of how the organization is. And
Yeah,
then, secondly, I want to help the organization build awareness and a shared language. So, people need to understand those key concepts that we talk about when we talk about diversity, inclusion. Okay.
yeah,
So, we need to
yeah,
know what bias is, what stereotypes are, you know, is as well. When we talk about privilege, I know a lot of people don't like talking about it, but we need to
mhm,
know what privilege is. We need
yeah,
to know what it means. We need to know what racism is. These are basic, right? But we need to know. We need to know about allyship, about equity, inclusion, belonging. So
yeah,
education is only the beginning. Okay. Right. So we have that educational piece. And then hopefully we can then examine those systems and behaviors.
mm,
So where might exclusion be occurring in recruitment, in meetings, in progression? Okay. In project allocation, in performance reviews, informal networks.
mhm,
Okay. Then we can start doing that. And then hopefully we can then identify practical actions, responsibilities, and then start to measure progress. Talk about who owns each action. What will be
that's it.
different? How will
Yeah,
employees experience that difference? How will leaders know whether it's working? And Sim, you know this because we've spoken about this, you know, a couple of times before. There must be
yeah,
accountability, right?
yeah. If there's no accountability, then there's no deliverable every
Exactly.
single time. You
Exactly.
know, if nobody has responsibility for something, you're not going to get it done. It drops down the list of items on your to-do
No,
list.
you're not going to get
It's
it
never
done.
going to get completed. Yeah,
Exactly. So that accountability is key. And I always say to tell people this, because I think for me, Sim, it's so important. It's that continual learning and education.
yeah,
I am completely immersed in the topic, but I don't know it all. I make mistakes. I'm constantly educating myself and learning.
yeah,
And when I tell people this, it's almost like, what are you trying to say, Chikre? Are you trying to say that I'm uneducated? No, I'm trying to say that it's a process. Okay.
yeah.
Inclusion is not just a project, right?
It's ongoing.
With a finishing
It's
date. Oh, it finishes on, I don't know, the 21st of June. It's an ongoing practice of learning, unlearning. I know exactly. Oh, when do we
yeah,
finish? No, it's just that ongoing. So
yeah,
trying to let people know that. So it's a process. There's a lot that has to be done, but these
yeah.
are the really important steps.
No, I definitely understand that. And like, look, we've spoken about intersectionality. I feel like we've
Mm,
skipped something, so I want us to go back a little bit. We've mentioned intersectionality. We've mentioned some of the other factors apart from like color that can impact it. can you like name some of like the sections that fall under like
Mm.
inclusion that people might not have realized actually sits under that inclusive banner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So even when we look at intersectionality, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you look at me, so my race obviously is a big part of my identity. And I always say
Mm.
to people, that's the first thing you see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see the color of my skin. Okay. And then you probably see I'm a woman. So if you look at those layers of intersectionality,
Yeah.
I'm just not a black person. I'm also a
Yeah.
black woman. So when we look at those layers of intersectionality, say for example, I'm a black woman with a disability. That's
Mm.
another layer of discrimination that I can face because of who I am.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we look at intersectionality and when we look at those different layers, that makes us us. Does that make sense? You
Yeah.
know, and this is
100%.
something that
Yeah.
people need to really look at. And even like earlier when you spoke about, yes, we're talking about gender and the visible parts of
Yeah.
inclusion and diversity. What about the invisible parts?
Well, that's what I mean. Because like we lean
You
into
know,
socio-economic, like how
exactly,
did you grow up? Were you in a
exactly.
rich family? Were you in a poor family?
Yeah,
Because socio-economic also falls under
yes,
inclusion, right?
of course it
People of a
does.
certain level will not go for jobs that of people that might have gone to Oxford or
Right,
Cambridge. So
right.
and I think this is why I wanted to have this session with you because like so many people believe that diversity and inclusion stops with color,
Mm,
and
mm,
they need
mm,
to understand that
mm, mm, mm,
actually there are,
mm,
I
mm.
think last time
Yeah,
I checked, 12 different factors that can
yeah, yeah.
impact,
Of
yeah,
course.
on the inclusion side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So even if
It's
when you look at age and if you're
yeah, the
neurodivergent, yeah,
ageism, like yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you know, it's crazy. I follow people that are neurodiverse that talk about the issues that they've had in workplaces where they might have asked if they can wear headphones because they can't deal with the noise of the office. It helps them to concentrate, and those requests have been declined.
Mm.
That falls under inclusion,
Of
you
course it
know.
does. Of course
All
it
of
does.
those big things that people and businesses are not understanding and not prepped for. So this is why this session with us today is so important, so
Mm,
people
mm,
understand that there are lots of factors and that they can ask questions if they're not sure.
exactly.
So I was thinking about like workplaces, and we're talking about all of these different things
Mm,
that we're seeing
mm,
in workplaces. So you could be neurodiverse, you could have another disability, you could
mm-hmm.
be a woman, you could be trans at that point. All of that factors in to make you who you are, as we've spoken about. So, what do you think when you like have been talking to people, or I know people reach out to you all the time, they're having issues in their workplaces, people don't quite understand them, and they go through a lot. Yeah. When you think about that, like, what's one behavior that you see in workplaces that quietly excludes people, that those people will come and talk to you because you're a safe space, but
Mm,
they don't have that safe space at work? Like,
mm,
what things are you hearing that people might not necessarily be doing on purpose, but it's still creating an exclusive workplace and
mm,
atmosphere?
mm, mm. That's a really good question, Sim. And okay, so coming from that recruitment background, okay, one
Mm.
thing I did notice is that especially in the workplace, we are all expected to be the same. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
yeah,
And visually, the way I see it, Sim, lots of think about lots of circular pegs,
yeah,
okay, that fit into a circular hole, right? But I'm that cube. I'm the
yeah. Me
cube,
too.
right? So it's do you see what I mean? So
Yeah,
I I really don't fit into that hole. Does that
yeah,
make sense? Okay.
yeah,
So, Sim, it could be a number of things, like what you mentioned. So, what if you had to wear headphones? So, what? Why? Why am I expected to be like everyone else? Why don't we celebrate the differences in people?
that's it.
Right? We're not all clones. And that's what I don't quite understand. But we are
Mm.
expected to be like everyone else. We're expected to be clones,
Yeah,
right? We're
yeah,
expected to be that circular peg. when we're both the cube. So we don't
Mm.
fit into that little. Does that visual? Can you see the visual I'm talking about?
The visual works perfectly, which is why I'm giggling, because I sit there and you've known me for 10 years coming up, right? And you know that I have never fit into the circular hole. I have never, not that I've wanted to.
Nor have I.
I've known, I've known that I can't work in certain places. Like
No.
I can't see myself working in insurance per se. I can't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
myself working in finance. I am the most random HR person you find. Don't get me wrong, I know my stuff front to back,
Oh, you're
but
amazing. Yeah.
people don't know that when they look at me at first.
Mm,
They
mm.
see this cheeky black woman covered in tattoos that has a penchant
Love,
for swearing,
love.
yeah, you know, and is completely different to people's mindset of what HR looks like and how HR operates. I'm
Yeah,
completely different. And I love that about me. I
yeah.
would never change it.
And that's the key. But how do we make sure that people don't change who they are? Because
That's it.
organizations make you change. They make you be
Oh
not
yeah.
yourself at work. They make you
We've
try and
done
fit into that circular peg.
that we've both done it. You and I have both done it. I know that we will speak from experience of code switching. And for people who don't know what code switching is, I am from South London. You can hear that I'm from South London, but I can turn my
South
voice
London.
in from South London into something that's more professional. And you
Mm,
dress in a certain way, you speak in
mhm,
a certain way, you
mhm,
change the
mhm.
inflection of your
Yeah,
voice to
yeah.
make others comfortable. And
Yes.
putting on that second skin
Mhm.
is exhausting. By the time you get home, you can't think for to do anything because being two people running in the same body, exhausting. And if people are having to do that to come to work, your workplace is not set up correctly.
I agree.
You
I
know,
totally
and we've
agree.
both done that.
Yeah, and I just think if we look at inclusion and diversity, what does it
Yeah,
really mean? It really means that me and you can be our
yeah,
true, authentic self in the workplace,
yeah,
right? We can be ourselves. And I think a lot of workplaces do not let us be our true, authentic selves. And I
yeah,
think being our true, authentic self, people think, oh, that means being unprofessional. No, it doesn't. It
mhm,
means that we're not being like everybody else.
yeah,
Okay. And surely that's a good thing.
yeah. There's advantage to
Surely,
it.
surely.
Look, there's papers. There's so much papers and research that says businesses produce and do better when
Exactly.
there is more diversity within the workforce.
Exactly. Exactly. But I think a lot of organizations just don't listen to that because
No.
Sim, you know this as well. And I was in the city 2 weeks ago working with a client and
Mm,
you can just do a visual check. And I know I'm looking for the visual parts of diversity walking through the
yeah,
city. And what's the
yeah,
visual parts? Easily gender, race, right?
yeah.
And
Hmm.
you just don't see enough in the city. And we're living in London, one of the most diverse cities in the world. And
Yeah.
then you walk into the workplace, okay? And of course, you see lots of diversity at the bottom. But as you go to
Hmm.
the top, it's almost like a funnel, right? It
Yeah.
narrows out, okay? And this is the problem. We don't see enough because people are scared. People are hiring the same type of people,
The same, the same, the same.
the
It's just,
same.
it's really disappointing,
So
but it's what
disappointing.
happens, you know.
Yeah.
So when I think about these companies, that change their logos, it's Pride Month. We're wrapping up Pride Month now. It's the
Oh,
last day of Pride Month,
have you
and
seen
it's
the
been
post I did on Pride Month?
I
Did you have a
did,
look? The
I
box.
did,
Let's start packing things away.
I commented on it because I was like, this year, more than any other year, Pride has been like a ghost town.
Terrible.
It's made me so sad. It's been so silent and so quiet, and we've had businesses that change their logo and throw up the flag.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
but like when we think about this, like when companies say, like, we're doing celebrations, we're doing Black History Month, we're doing International Women's Day, or we're doing Pride, it sounds good, but they're not actually changing anything. Like, how do they actually support employees that are under these factors? Because it's not just 1 month or 1 week, like Mental Health Week. Mental
Mhm.
Health Month. It's not just 1 week. If you're suffering from poor mental health, 1 week of us talking about it is not going to detract from the fact that you're living with it every day of your life. Like,
Exactly.
how do companies, and it's this question that we started talking about in the beginning, like, how do they go from the performative to
Mm.
actually helping their employees, making their
Mhm.
employees see?
Yeah, and oh, it's really makes me sad because a common phrase that I often hear as well is that we celebrate diversity. And yes, it
Yeah,
does sound positive, Sim, okay, but I would ask, what does celebration mean when
yeah,
employees are still experiencing barriers to recruitment, to progression, to pay, to psychological safety? Okay.
yeah,
And of course, there's nothing wrong with recognizing Pride Month or um, Women's History Month or Black History Month or any other significant occasion. The problem is when celebration replaces action.
yeah.
And that's what we are seeing. So, month of June, okay, all those rainbow flags, you put them up,
Mhm.
but what are you doing? Okay. So, yes, you might highlight inspiring stories in June, but avoid discussing disparities during the
Yeah,
rest of the year. Do you see what I mean? So, my
yeah,
message is this: do not only celebrate people, examine their everyday experiences, because
yeah,
inclusion must be visible decisions, investment, and accountability
yeah,
365 days of the year. And Sim, this is what we're not seeing. And this is
yeah.
why I had the box with packing away all those flags, because it's
That's
coming out
it.
in 2027, isn't it?
That's
Okay.
it.
And it's the same for Black History Month. Oh, Black History
Yeah.
Month. Let's highlight a few of
Pack
our
it in.
Black
Make sure it's
colleagues.
neat. We'll pack it in a box and then
Exactly.
we'll
Exactly.
shift it away. You
Exactly. A bit
know,
like our Christmas decoration, isn't it? We've all got a Christmas
exactly
box.
that. It's that concept. And what's hurtful, and like 25 years doing this now, 25 years. Every time I think about that, and I've done it across all these countries, right? But the same thing rings true. People know when companies are actually inclusive or when it's performative.
Mm.
And it comes out in exit interviews, it comes out in
Mm.
engagement surveys, it comes
Yeah.
out, you see it, right? You see the results. Like, so if people truly believe that the company is for them, they've got an EAP set up where we can speak to a black therapist, a LGBTQ therapist, we've got ERG groups, employee resource groups, where we have communities where we can come together and we
Mm.
are supporting each other. Like, then they understand that we're in a level of a place where there is inclusion. But when you throw a flag up or you pull out a speaker to speak because
Mm.
it's a certain month and then it all
Mm.
disappears again, you are not
Performative.
building employee loyalty with that. And the thing is, like, there is so much discernment now. Like, people have, I always, when I speak to people and I coach people and we have conversations, especially when it comes to going to interviews and understanding the business, you need to interview the business just like they interview you, because you are
Exactly.
going to put yourself in that culture. Yeah.
Exactly.
And understand that culture. And people know the difference between performative
Yep.
and yes, this place is truly for me. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of businesses take shortcuts because they think that people don't, but they actually
Mm.
really do.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
totally agree. You know, the funny thing about it, there was a time when
Mm,
when I used to speak to job seekers, and they
yeah,
would say, "Oh, Chikere, I will have a look at their websites just to see
yeah,
what they're doing when it comes to inclusion and diversity." And even
mhm,
during the interview process, they were asked those questions as well. I
yeah.
don't know if people are still doing it, because I know times are hard in terms of finding jobs and all the
Jobs
rest of it. But I just
mhm,
think people, yeah, I think people, hopefully people are still doing
yeah,
it, because
yeah,
it's something that we need to do. We need to
yeah.
really hold organizations accountable for their actions. There's no point saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, when you're not doing it.
That's it. That is exactly it. I mean, one of the things I say to people is speaking to people that are within the business, going
Mm.
to certain sites that will give you truthful reviews about working for certain companies. It all gives you a round out of what the culture could possibly look like and be before you step into it. Because psychological safety, one of the biggest things out there that we have to be aware of and make sure we are keeping in mind. Like the last podcast before last I did with Mary, who runs her thing of making sure that organizations have psychological safety. It's big and people need that. Like
Mm.
you need to be able to come to work and feel like you're okay. Everything's
Yes, of
going to be
course. Of course you do.
so. We're talking about this, and we're talking about the leaders. But let's talk about like the leaders, the hiring managers. Like, how do we take this from being like here and help people like leaders, hiring managers, individuals to turn good intention into an everyday action?
Which
Because,
is so
like,
important.
you know,
And that's the
where do they
important
start?
part. It's the action
Yeah,
part, isn't it? And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
for a lot of people, it is quite difficult because how do you
yeah,
start to do that? For a
yeah,
lot of those leaders and hiring managers, they're on that learning journey as well that we're all on, okay? And they need
mm,
to do the basics. So first and foremost, that whole your why. Why? You need to know
yeah,
why. Why is this important? Okay.
yeah,
And you need to know what do I need to achieve and how I'm going to achieve it. Okay.
mhm,
Um, I like to say that I help them make inclusion specific. Okay, I think that's really important. So,
yeah.
for example, be more inclusive is just too broad.
It's
Instead,
wide.
it's
How
too
long is a
broad.
piece of
What does
string?
that mean?
Yeah,
What does being more inclusive mean? Come on, let's expand. So instead, we look at decisions and moments where leaders can influence. So, for example, um,
yeah,
as well as education, look at little things like who speaks and who gets interrupted in meetings, who receives
mm,
constructive feedback and development opportunities, who's hired and why they're hired, how are shortlists created, how are interview questions and assessment criteria, are they consistent, who's given work, who's given the opportunities. So these are some of the
that's it.
things that they've got to start to think about. So I
Yeah,
like to say that we turn intentions into observable behaviors. But again,
yeah,
it takes time, Sim. It's something that it
yeah.
doesn't happen overnight. And I think a lot of the time people want results now, 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 but it's not going to happen overnight.
They've
Okay.
got to do the work.
They've got to do the work. So even though good intentions matter, but people's experiences and their behavior and their decisions also
Mm,
matter. So it's really looking at that work that organizations have to do. And
yeah.
organizations, as I said, they're not willing to put the work in. Because I still have people saying to me, oh, Chikere, I find it really difficult to hire diverse talent. So what does that mean? What does diverse talent mean? And where are you looking for diverse talent?
Well,
Because
you literally, yeah,
diverse talent, it's almost like, oh my gosh, we can't find any diverse talent. There's nobody educated and all the rest of it. But Sam, you
mm,
think about it, my son graduated last year. If you go
yeah.
to those universities, it's full of
That's it. Get into the graduate
diverse.
rounds,
It's full
go
of
through
them.
all those things.
It's
One
full
of the
of
things
diverse talent who aren't given an
it's
opportunity.
it's ridiculous. So one of the things I also did before I left my last place, because I helped run DE and well, I run DE and I there at the time. But one of the things I did was remove the requirement for a degree unless it was when I mean necessary to the role, maybe compute something in computers and IT where you needed it. Remove that because then you get a whole tranche of applicants back to the
Yes,
socio-economic that might not have
exactly.
been able to go and get the degree but can actually still do the job. They've been
And
doing the
I,
job for 15 years,
yeah,
but they
yeah, yeah,
just didn't have that bit of paperwork. And you open
exactly.
it up to a whole broad range of people that you would have lost because of that one specification
I
that
agree.
actually doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
I agree.
Leave it
I
in where it's needed, but you remove it where
exactly.
it's not. You know,
I totally agree. But also, I think for me, what's really important is also understanding that these
yeah,
diverse talent, they do have the experience. They do have, okay, they may not have the experience, but a lot of them do have the qualification. Okay. Because there's also the assumption that a diverse talent may not have a degree, for example. Okay.
yeah,
They, there's so many people that do have degrees, Sim. But
yeah,
one thing I have noted, a lot of them are not given the opportunity. Okay. Right. Where their counterpart may be given an opportunity, they're not given that opportunity because of their identity. And that's
mhm,
another thing we need to understand.
yeah,
Okay. Because I think it is difficult. Okay, let me talk about young black graduates who are leaving university. they find it far harder than their white counterparts to find jobs. And they're always told they're not good enough. Why aren't they good enough? Because they are good enough.
Yeah,
Okay. And this is what frustrates me. I see this firsthand. So, how do we make sure that the recruitment process is fair? And when they're in the workplace, it's also fair,
yeah,
because the workplace is full of microaggressions and, obstacles
bias.
that prevent bias, that
Yeah,
prevents people with marginalized identities progressing. And that's another thing we need to understand.
we truly do need to understand. I literally had somebody posted yesterday. She is the CHRO, so Chief HR Officer for Lidl's.
Oh,
And Lidl's have now removed the necessity for a CV. They are now looking for the people that are marginalized. They're now looking for people who have struggled to get into work. They no longer need to have this requirement of a CV because a lot of people don't know how to build them. Yeah. If you've been a stay-at-home parent for the last 15 years, your kids have gone out to do what they're doing now, and you're trying to get in the workplace, you're not really going to have a CV. And she was basically explaining that they're now trying to become more inclusive by moving forward with that, which is amazing
that is
progress. I
incredible.
had to give her
I
her
love that.
flowers. Like,
I
this
must
is
go
a
and find that
great.
post.
I
Yeah,
will forward it to you. I will
please
forward it to
do.
you.
Yeah.
I had to give her flowers because I was like, look, this is great. Like, I've been talking about this for years, like holding stuff against people. Actually, there's some of the strongest candidates you might find because they've had to multitask, juggle, budget, do all of these things to survive, which can actually be taken from that space and pushed into this space. And
Yes,
they will be one of
definitely.
your most loyal employees because they're so thankful that they've been
I
given
love
that
that.
chance to
Yeah.
show what they can do, you
Hmm.
know? So, like, inclusion falls under that remit. And I think that's what I'm trying to make sure people understand when we finish this today, that it's not just this little tiny box that most people think it is, which is race.
Yeah,
It isn't. It's so much
much more.
more.
I
And I
agree.
think about it, when you think about it, like we've spoken about accountability and stuff like that. But like, do you think allyship is more about education, behavior, or accountability?
Oh, I love talking about allyship. Really important. Love allyship. It needs all three, but
Yeah,
behavior and accountability are what makes the education meaningful. Okay.
yeah,
So that initial education bit helps us understand experiences beyond our own. Okay.
mm,
So if you think about my lived experience, I can only talk about my lived experience as a woman and as a black woman. Okay.
yeah,
If I can't tell you my lived experience as someone who belongs in the LGBTQ plus community, because I don't belong in that community, but
yeah,
I will put in the work to try and understand. So that's why the
understand.
education piece comes in.
Yeah,
Also, language matters, right, Sim? So
yeah,
the education piece would give us a language, and it will help us recognize the bias, the inequity, the exclusion. Okay.
yeah,
Um, but someone can read a book. It's easy to read a book, listen to a book, attend every workshop, and still remain silent when action is needed. So
yeah,
I always say to people, allyship is a practice. It's not a label.
yeah,
Okay. And this is what's really, really important. Understanding that it's a practice. It's an everyday practice. And then the accountability bit is also essential because allyship cannot be based only on how we see ourselves. We need to consider our impact. Okay. We need to be
mm,
open to feedback. I make mistakes all the time. So I need to be
mm,
open to feedback as well. I
yeah,
need to acknowledge my mistakes and I need to change my behavior. Right.
yeah,
So I would say education builds awareness. Okay.
yeah,
Um, behavior demonstrates commitment. And then the
mm,
accountability, how can I say? The accountability will sustain the change.
got you, got you. That makes sense. No, it does make sense. So, like, if we think about it like that, say we've got scenarios of a manager who might be listening now and they're scared of like saying or doing the wrong thing. What's one simple step that they can take this week to start being a better ally?
Yeah, definitely. Start by listening to understand rather than listening to defend yourself. Just
Hmm.
listen. That is part of allyship. Okay. So have a
Yeah,
conversation with your team, ask for, maybe ask for focused questions such as, is there anything about how we communicate, how we hold meetings or allocate opportunity that makes it harder for you to contribute? Okay.
yeah,
Um, do not immediately explain why something happens or try and prove that you're already inclusive. Just
yeah,
listen. It's okay
yeah,
just not to say anything and just listen. And thank
yeah.
people for their honesty. And
Hmm.
identify one action you can take. But remember, that whole psychological safety needs to be in place. They're not
Yeah.
going to say anything if they don't feel safe. Okay.
Hmm.
And leaders, you're always not going to use the perfect language. Allyship does not require perfection. As an ally, you will make mistakes. Okay.
Yeah,
But allyship requires, I guess, humility, courage, and that willingness to learn. Okay. So the fear of saying something wrong should not become an excuse. So I always say to people, don't let the fear of saying something wrong become an
yeah,
excuse. Okay.
yeah,
For saying nothing when someone is being excluded or harmed.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So really start by listening to understand rather than listening to defend yourself.
Got you. I think that is some really, really great advice. Really great advice. So, if a founder or a leader that's listening to this wants to make their hiring more inclusive this month, what's one concrete change that they can make to their next job ad?
Definitely. So I'll say something like, separate what is genuinely essential from what is simply familiar or preferred. Okay.
Yeah,
Language in job adverts and description really, really important. So, those kind of vague terms and language must be a good cultural fit. And tech
yeah.
firms, rock star, digital native, high. What does all that mean? High energy. Does that mean rock star? What's a rock star? Oh, what's a rock star? I want to
I'm
apply for that
laughing
job.
because
What is
I see these ads and I giggle because I'm just like, huh?
You know what I mean? What is that? What is it? What's high energy? What if you're not high energy? Do you know what I mean? What
Well,
if you're not, do you know what I mean? Or digital
that's
native or rock
exactly it.
star?
That's exactly, look, there is, I like to do a lot of research in regards to HR and talent and DE&I and all of these things. And it has been proven
Mm.
that men with 30% of the skills will
Yeah, would
apply. But if
apply. Yeah,
women see jobs
yeah, yeah, yeah.
advertised like this,
Yeah,
they will shy away and not
exactly.
apply, even though they have the right skill set. So, like, wording it properly makes the biggest difference because you are excluding a whole tranche of applicants that would be perfect for your job and able to do
I
amazing work.
so agree. I so agree.
Yeah,
So word it properly, describe
yeah,
the actual skills, responsibility, and outcomes required. Forget all that rock star, okay?
yeah,
And changing the advert is only one part, isn't it? Think about
yeah,
it. Where are you
yeah.
advertising it? Okay.
That's it.
So where's the role being advertised? How the application's being assessed? Who
Yeah,
sits on the interview panel? Okay. So these are lots of things you have to think about. But
yeah,
yeah, I'll also say Sim, reach out to Sim, reach out to me, is something that we can definitely help with.
yeah,
But yeah, language,
definitely.
language and where you advertise is really important.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say to a recruiter or a
Mm.
leader listening who wants to be known as the go-to person for diverse talent,
Ah,
especially like using your tools, like there's inclusive training, there's the allyship toolkit.
toolkit.
So
Yeah, yeah,
tell
yeah.
me a little bit about both and how people can utilize that if
Okay.
they want to start their journey or understand a bit better.
Yeah, definitely. So, firstly, before I talk about them, I'll probably say I'll encourage them to move away from thinking of diverse talent as a separate pool
Yeah,
of
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they need to find, and that's what I find. It's like, oh, diverse talent. It's like, oh, diverse talent. Let's find them. That talent
Mm.
already exists. Sim, I've said this already. The talent is there. The real
Yeah.
question is whether your organization is looking in the right places. Okay. Recognizing talent in different forms and creating a culture in which people can succeed after they thrive. So there's no
Yeah.
point looking for diverse talent if they're not going to thrive within your organization. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Being the go-to person for diverse talent should not mean collecting contacts from unrepresented communities. It should mean becoming known for your fair process, your transparent communication, your inclusive leadership, and a genuine commitment to people's progression. Okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously the Allyship Toolkit, I help recruiters and leaders examine entire employee journeys from that wording of a job advert and the way interviews are conducted to
Yeah.
onboarding, development, belonging, and progression. And then the Allyship Toolkit also includes a bit more education about what allyship is. Okay, those initial terminology that we need. We need to
Yeah.
understand, like I mentioned before, what allyship is, what bias and microaggressions are, what privileges. They're the kind of thing that set us up on our allyship journey that we're all on. And just understanding that allyship is a practice, it's a journey, it's lifelong, it doesn't finish. There's not a certain set date to say,
Yeah.
oh, we've done it now, it finishes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think try not to ask how we attract diverse talent. Just do the work so that your organization becomes that magnet for
Yeah.
everybody,
That
for
people
lots
want
of
to come
different
to.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
need lots of different people in that work in the workplace. We need lots of little
Yeah.
triangles and squares and pegs. Do you know what I mean? You know, in that
That's
little
it.
peg box. We need
That's
lots
it.
of different
Yeah, little
shapes
pen
in there.
box. You need
Yeah.
all of the different shapes. And I think
No.
one of the last questions I've got for you before we wrap up is there's been so many changes recently.
Yeah.
As you said at the beginning, we've got DE&I, we've got EDI, we've got inclusion, we've got just the word diversity. Does it matter? Like, which is there one that we should be leaning towards more than one more than the other, or is it whatever you find along the way?
Why are we changing it to make it sound a bit more comfortable? Why are we not having that conversation? Do you know what I mean? Oh, let's change it so it sounds less painful. Okay,
Yeah.
think about why is it? Why don't you like those words? Why is it
Mhm.
sounding? Why is it sounding quite painful?
Yeah.
You know.
It's
So yeah, so it's not so much about the words. It's just why why are certain words making you think? Why is it making you feel uncomfortable? Okay, and
mm,
I'll say you've got work to do. Think about
yeah.
it. You've got work to do.
So, Chi, thank you so much for joining me on this today. It's been an amazing chat, and I know we could talk ages about all of these different things and different concepts. But if there's somebody that thinks to themselves, "Oh my gosh, like I really have some work to do. The company has some work to do." Where can they find you? How can they get in contact with you to work with you at Inclusive?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sim. So I am on LinkedIn. So Chikere Igbokwe or Inclusive. You would find me. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. You can also email me. Sim, you're going to put my email
Yeah,
address up?
we'll put
Yeah,
all
or
of the contact details.
amazing. Or my website, www.inclusive with a C, .co.uk.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today. Like, I knew it was going to be a great chat. I knew we'd get into the bones of everything. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Take Flight podcast specialist series. Like, every time I meet a specialist founder who knows all of their stuff, I get more and more excited about the networking and the places that we could take this and what people can take from it.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
really appreciate your time today.
No worries. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for what you do. And thank you just for being an awesome, awesome human being.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.